Hello, YouTube. So, people send me stuff like this, saying that I should take a look at this tanker truck or series of rail cars that blew up in Ohio. And you get stuff like this, 2.7 million hits. They want you to think they shot down the UFO, so you'll ignore the Chernobyl-like disaster they just caused in Ohio, one of the most fertile regions of the country. Got no idea who this guy is, but anyway, no. As someone who's driven through the breadbasket of America, the corn belt, as it were, this ain't it. And you can just mark one eyeball. You see all the farmland around here. No, no, nor me. And of course, you get people like Marjorie Taylor Greene weighing in on this, that East Palestine, Ohio, undergoing an ecological disaster because authorities blew up the train derailment cars carrying hazardous chemicals, and press are being arrested for telling the stories. Oh, but UFOs, what's going on? I think someone is trying to make it sound much worse than it is. So, vested interest in that anyway. So the actual video of it blown up is fairly impressive. In fact, hang on.
Train derailed Friday.
Oh, that's beautiful. I never saw that before. So you actually see that they've vented this car as well. These are controlled vents, so they're actually spraying it all out there. You can see it. That's amazing. I didn't see that before. So this is obviously the one that caught fire, and this was the one where they're venting it and it's not quite caught fire yet. In fact, we should catch fire. There we go. Beautiful. Now, and stuff that you'll notice, it burns with a very sooty flame, and like most hydrocarbons, it burns to give carbon dioxide and water. In this case, it's an incomplete combustion, which is why there's so much soot in the flame, which is why it's so bright and white here, and why a few seconds later, you see all the soot later. And it's also a halogenated hydrocarbon, which means you're going to get hydrogen chloride in the vapor, hydrochloric acid.
Hazardous materials as flames lit up the sky in northeastern Ohio.
The evacuation order is in place for anyone within a mile radius.
Mile radius is probably sensible. That's about where I would have had it pegged.
Of the crash site.
These aren't storm clouds.
I'm pretty sure those are storm clouds, as we will see in just a second. So yeah, when you see it from above, it's like, no, that's the actual disaster. These are your regular clouds. Sorry, dude. They're just clouds, and you can see just instantly it's bloody tiny. And like I was saying, this is mostly just going to be soot. It looks ugly, but and apparently these are Ohio cops reporting someone for telling the truth. Although why these are Ohio cops? And if they're really intent on shutting down the truth, why didn't they arrest the person videoing any of this? Let's just say I'm skeptical. Yeah, and also, why aren't they anywhere near the actual disaster? And there are apparently some dead fish, which I can well believe.
Residents say they can still smell chlorine.
Well, yeah, you can smell chlorine in pools. It's not necessarily so what? Yeah.
Complained about their eyes watering when they go outside, and one woman says the noxious air killed her chickens.
And apparently it killed someone's chickens, but nothing else. Apparently, oops, pet's dead. Yeah, I might need to see a little more evidence on that.
One woman says the noxious air killed her chickens.
Out of nowhere, he just started coughing really hard and just shut down and went very fast.
Yeah, if it's going to kill pets, it would kill people as well. Anyway, and this is where I come into it. Someone sent me this, which, he's 5 million hits. And probably the best video I've seen on the Pennsylvania, Ohio. It's pretty mind-blowing. And someone says, yeah, well, I want to know what Thunderfoot thinks. Well, you're about to find out. So, he goes through some basics about, where it is.
Palestine's about an hour north of Pittsburgh, almost halfway to Cleveland. Norfolk Southern has a rail line that goes right through town and vinyl chloride. It's on the edge outside of town on the border of PA and Ohio. Of the cars that crashed, 5 of them contain vinyl chloride. It's a monomer used to make PVC. The reporting on this has gotten vinyl chloride confused with polyvinyl chloride, the polymer made out of vinyl chloride.
So this is all perfectly true. The main almost the only purpose of vinyl chloride that I know of is making polyvinyl chloride, which is like it's the soft plastic tubing that's used in most of the food industry. Incidentally, it does burn to give exactly the same obnoxious stuff that you've just seen. It burns with black smoke and an orange flame and stinks of hydrogen chloride when you burn it. The burning products are exactly the same. Polymerizing it does basically nothing.
Now, the reason that this distinction is really important is vinyl chloride is very hazardous and very flammable.
Just so you know, the polymer will burn quite well as well when you get it going. He is right. The vinyl chloride's actually it's the monomer. So it's, in terms of physical properties, it's fairly similar to butane. In that, so this is the stuff. And what makes it kind of nasty is it's a fairly small compound and it's fairly hydrophobic. The small stuff, even the small hydrophobic stuff, right? Once you get up to the bigger hydrophobic stuff, it's like oil. It has very, very low solubility in water. So there's a limit to the damage that it can actually do to you as an organism. The smaller stuff tends to have higher solubilities in water, which is what you get down to here. Its solubility is 2 grams per liter, which is very low solubility, but it's hydrophobic stuff, kind of carcinogenic. Usually the way the carcinogenic stuff works is it tends to be hydrophobic and interacts with the middle bits of your DNA, which is also hydrophobic. Anyway, in terms of physical properties, it's basically like butane. That's the melting point. There you go. Boiling point is minus 13 Celsius. So it's comparable to butane. The stuff that people have in their cigarette lighters, they used to use as a propellant in whatever hairspray and such like. So it burns very well in air, and it's fairly volatile, which is why it was actually really quite impressive. Let's see if we can come back to that bit where it's just flashing off. So this is basically like venting a cigarette lighter,
Train
and then
Friday.
just on a much bigger scale. I mean, that's actually really impressive that you can see them venting it. This is obviously controlled. They meant to do this. Anyway, let's come back to our guy here and see what he's got to say.
Vinyl chloride is a plastics that's used in like everything. The other thing about vinyl chloride is that it boils at 8 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's shipped in its liquid form. Meaning that when these trains crashed and these started leaking, they weren't just leaking liquid, but they were spewing boiling gas.
Well, you can see they were quite deliberately vented. But so what? I mean, you vent a volatile compound, yeah, it's going to evaporate. I mean, if you spill water on the ground, some of it goes onto the ground and then it all evaporates eventually.
So vinyl chloride is really toxic. OSHA has the permissible limit of how much you can be exposed to it during an 8-hour shift.
Right, so he's now going to go, we're going to use his occupational exposure limit in a second, okay?
1 ppm part per million, average over 8 hours. So
right, 1 part per million. Remember that one.
Prior to this, the biggest spill of this chemical was in New Jersey, where
and eventually he'll get on to telling us to how big the actual spill was. So 5 rail cars. My usual reckoning would be the trucks on the road. They usually have 20-ton cargo when they're transporting liquids. rail cars, they're going to be multiples of that, but not big multiples.
5 train cars. These kinds of tanker cars can carry between 25 and 33,000.
Yeah, those numbers mean absolutely okay. Gallons, whatever. Let's. I think he eventually gets to numbers.
250 to 250,000 pounds.
Beautiful. Okay, so now he's going to say 250,000 pounds. So that's 125 tons. Right, so to go from pounds to kilos, you just divide by 2 and then wipe 3 zeros off the end to go to tons. So that's 100 odd tons is what he thinks the spillage is.
Of vinyl chloride. That's per train car, 5 train cars. There's maybe 1 million pounds of this toxic.
Fine. Okay, £1 million. So 500 tons. Yeah, 500 tons. So I'll make a note of that. 500 tons.
Chemical spilling into the ground and also boiling off into the air. But then it caught on fire. I think this is where the reporting is really bad because...
Well, actually, it's clear that they set it on fire. But
no one is mentioning what the byproduct of vinyl chloride burning is. Of the many byproducts...
I can tell you, it's 1,000 times less toxic than the actual vinyl chloride itself.
Products of burning vinyl chloride, one of them is hydrogen chloride.
Yeah, which is relatively harmless. It basically dissolves in water to give hydronium. It's basically hydrochloric acid.
Hydrogen chloride's really unstable and latches onto water, like just water vapor in the atmosphere, and that turns into hydrochloric acid.
Those things, right now, those things are exactly the same.
Now, government officials from the railroad, both the governor of Pennsylvania and Ohio are calling burning off the 1 million pounds of this stuff a success, but not mentioning that it means that we have hundreds of thousands of pounds of acid in the air, potentially.
No. There are absolutely hundreds of thousands of pounds of hydrogen chloride in the air. But I can tell you this is, you compare this to your typical forest fire or something, and these are relatively small potatoes. So let's come to our drawing board. So here we have our... Oops. There we go. Super. So we had 500 tons, yeah? A ton of regular watery type liquid is about 1 ton per meter cube. So this is about 500 cubic meters of... It turns out the vinyl chloride's a little denser, so it'll be a bit lower, but it doesn't matter. They're just ballpark numbers to give us a feel for these things. So it's roughly 500 cubic meters of this chemical that we've got. When you go from liquid to gas, you typically increase the volume by a factor of 1,000. This is gas at 1 atmosphere. So that's going to be 500, and what did I say? 3 more zeros. That's the cubic meters of PBC gas at 1 atmosphere. And he said that the OSHA limits, this is where you can actually work in it at a permissible level sort of indefinitely, was something like 1 ppm. 1 part per million. So we basically need to add 3 zeros on the end of this, and we'll get the volume of air that you would have to dilute these 500 tons in for it to be safe to basically work in indefinitely, or at least according to the government safety standards. So that's 500, 3 more zeros, and then we need 6 more zeros on top of that, and that's cubic meters. Boom, beautiful. So that's the at its most toxic, that's how much air you have to dilute it into. Now, how big a volume is 1,000, millions, billions? 500 billion cubic meters of air. That sounds like an awful lot of air that you have to dilute this stuff into. So if we take a simple cube that's going to be, and it's going to be a 1 kilometer cube. That's going to be, 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters. That's that one. Right. So the volume of a 1 kilometer cube is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you need more. It needs to be bigger than a 1 kilometer cube. And if you want to turn this from a 1 kilometer cube to a 10 kilometer cube, you're basically going to add, but that's a 1 kilometer cube. And if you want to turn that into a 10 kilometer cube, you're going to have to add 3 zeros on the end of it. So let's do this again like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's a 10 kilometer cube. So basically, all of this would fit. It's somewhat smaller than 10 kilometer cube, and that's the worst case scenario. And you come back to where is it? Where's our picture from the sky? Right. So that's what it looks like. Yeah, it looks like a horrible mushroom cloud. That's probably a 1 kilometer cube. But you've also got to bear in mind this is the Burnoff. The Burnoff is, if you were to just vent it like that into the atmosphere, then a 10 kilometer cube, the thing is the air dilutes this stuff incredibly quickly. Even relatively small amounts of air movement will dilute this to the point where it's volatile. It's a gas. This is one of the reasons why things like nerve agents are so ineffective as weapons. Is even a small amount of air movement, and the dilution just kills it. And this is orders of magnitude less toxic than nerve gas. And even if this was nerve gas, if you were to burn it, yeah, again, when you burn the stuff, it becomes orders of magnitude less toxic than it was before. And the hydrochloric acid, this just isn't an issue. I mean, I would fully expect it to kill some fish. Fish are fairly sensitive to this sort of thing. And yeah, if you're fairly nearby and it rains soon afterwards, you'll get, oh my God. So they're talking about birds.
10.
Yeah, we get lots of birds here as well. So yeah, fish are fairly sensitive to things like pH in the water and that sort of thing. But these will be relatively short-lived. Hydrogen chloride, completely normal. Hydronium in water. The dilution kills it really very quickly, and there is a limit to what you can do by just basically 5 tanker trucks, and especially if you catch them on fire. For me, the thing that I would, if I'm looking for someone to be worried about here,
Massive train derailed Friday.
these aromatics when they burn, this soot here. A lot of this can be because you're burning unsaturated stuff. You can get polyaromatics in the soot here, which can be they can be pretty carcinogenic. But again, they're just going to be spread over such a wide area that the dilution effectively kills it. So for me, yeah, it looks ugly as sin, but it's actually, I mean, looked at like this. This is not even a kilometer off the base, but it's gone up 2-3 kilometers, maybe. But you can see that the majority of it is going to be hugely diluted before it becomes exposed to people again. So yeah, is it a disaster? Yes. Is it the disaster that people are claiming? Not even close. You sort of compare this to the amount of stuff that oil tankers dump, or the amount of crap that coal burning power stations put out. 500 tons is just a starter for them. So yeah, on this grand scheme of things, I see this one as very overblown. But that is really cool that you actually see them venting it there. They said there were 5 cars. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on that. I hope you found it interesting, and yeah, see you next time. Ciao.